Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terri Ann Heiman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence in your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. This episode is being sponsored by Ritual and Shelter. Are you looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter online or in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics such as energy healing, crystal healing, Reiki, chakras, auras, the Akashic Records, shadow work, astrology, and earth-based healing. You can also find herbal teas and tinctures alongside their crystals and oils to help establish a mindful mindset and fluid ambience before meditation, ritual work, and reflection. Ritual and Shelter is dedicated to providing one-on-one, in-depth conversations with customers to help them find the most efficient healing methods and resources that match their unique interest and energy. They offer tarot sessions, Reiki, sound bowl, and crystal healing, and now they are offering witch consultations. Visit ritualshelter.com to book an appointment and bring peace back to the body, mind, and spirit. You can also find them on Instagram at Ritual Shelter Shop, as well as Pinterest at Ritual Plus Shelter. So as this podcast goes to air, we are currently in a very cosmic, energetic time. With Mercury and about 4 other planets in retrograde, you might feel a lot of old energy surfacing. This is a potent time that can trigger you to look deeply at your life, your patterns, and the ways in which you are holding yourself back. But this isn't something to fear. It's like a cosmic doorway opening up, inviting you to shed the old skin, drop those leaves, and look for the guidance of the spirit world coming in. The energy is all about rapid change, making shifts, showing us profound ways that we can allow ourselves to grow and shift and recognize these patterns all in the blink of an eye when we're aligned and open to noticing. And in the spirit of this profound connection that we have with the spirit world, we continue our series on death, dying, and communicating with our loved ones. What if that bond, so foundational to who we are, is truly eternal? In today's episode, we're delving into one of the most sacred and complex relationships of all, the one between a daughter and her mother. I am so honored to be joined by Dr. Lynn Roseman, a therapist, healer, and associate professor in integrative medicine. She is the author of the book, The Eternal Bond: Daughters Honor Their Mothers on the Other Side. Drawing from 20 moving narratives, her own original research and experience, Dr. Roseman's work sheds light on that enduring spiritual connection that can continue after a mother's death. In The Eternal Bond, she offers a comforting and validating space for those navigating the unique grief of mother loss, assuring us that our journeys don't have a set time length and that the signs we experience of our mother's presence are real and meaningful. Today, we'll be talking about these supernatural signs, the sacred bond between mothers and daughters, and how to navigate the journey of grief and spiritual connection. It is a conversation that promises to be both comforting and enlightening. And for those of you who feel this cosmic pull to go deeper and understand your own soul's journey, I have something special for you. I invite you to learn more about my upcoming Past, Present, Future, the Akashic Timeline Healing Method class. It's a class designed to help you recognize the present repeated patterns, habits, addictions, where they come from in the past, and how you can shift and heal them for your future. If you want to know more about this class and my private mentoring for your soul's journey, reach out, schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me, and together let's talk about the lessons you're going through in the present and how they were impacted by the past and what you can do to turn this around for your future. I'll put the link in the show notes for the call to schedule. Before we begin our interview, let's take a moment to pause and center and set an intention for where you are now. So, wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes for a few moments. Taking a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, call all your energy into you, slowing down. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, begin to align the spiritual body right on top of the emotional, mental, physical layers, all centering. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And now as you exhale, exhale right into the heart, dropping into the heart. Feel that awareness of your spirit and the greater spirit. Know that you are loved, guided, protected. Feeling all this energy coming in around us as we go to set this beautiful sacred space. We call in our Reiki masters, the teachers that have come before us, the angels to open our hearts with joy and love, calling in the crystal beings for amusement and magnification. And now calling in your higher self right above the crown to help receive the messages, open up this channel of light, setting that intention. Taking one more deep inhale and exhale all the way down, grounding, centering, and as you're ready, blinking the eyes back open, coming back. So my guest today, Janet Lynn Roseman, PhD, is an associate professor in integrative medicine at the Dr. Kiran Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine. She teaches courses in spirituality and medicine, art and medicine, and death and dying for medical school students. She received the first Joseph Moore President's Award for her work in oncology and spirituality from Lesley College and was a David Larson Fellow in Spirituality and Medicine at the Kluge Center for Scholars at the Library of Congress. Dr. Roseman is also the founding director of the Sydney Project in Spirituality and Medicine and Compassionate Care, a medical education program for physician residents. So let us welcome Dr. Roseman to the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and you bring a very, very deeply challenging, emotional subject to the forefront with your new book, The Eternal Bond. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I appreciate that validation. As you know, grief is a very difficult topic, and unfortunately, in our culture, it's also a taboo topic. No one really wants to talk about it. And especially not so much when someone has passed away, because then people are present, they're at the funeral, they might go to the home, they might be sitting Shiva or doing other rituals. But I'm thinking later when people really need the support when they're going through grief. And often people, I don't think they're being mean or they're being cruel. I think they don't know what to say or what to do. And it frightens them because let's face it, death is not a happy topic. It's a scary topic, or it certainly can be a scary topic. So they close down. It's threatening. It's definitely threatening. And I think that's really unfortunate.
I agree. I think people just don't know what to say. So they don't want to mention the loved one's name. Yeah, that's really what we want to do. Or they don't want to say anything or they ignore it or whatever. But I think it is a lack of education. I did want to say in our community just last week, we had a death cafe and it was very well attended. So I do think having books like this come out and conversations like this is helping to bring this out into the forefront.
Well, I agree. I agree. I think the more conversation, the more, quote, normalizing grief, the better. So people won't be shy about sharing their experiences. And I know, when I started talking to women who had lost their mothers, or I had mentioned I had lost my mom, women were so eager to share their stories. And they're also a little reluctant to share their stories about connection, about feeling their moms in sacred space, or hearing them telepathically, or other sort of non reality kind of experiences that they had. And they'd always be apologetic to me first, but then they'd be really enthusiastic about sharing it. And in the research that I did, it's very normal for people after the death of a loved one, especially someone they were very close to have these kind of sensory um, experiences.
Yeah.
It's just not something that we talk about, or if we talk about it, we talk about it privately.
Yeah, I agree. And, I call myself a midwife of the soul because I do help in ceremony and prepare the body for death and working with this kind of energy. But I do think it's important that we share all phases of it. And one of the things that we noticed at the Death Cafe the other day is that lots of times when people do experience, especially the loss of their parent, a parent, whether it's mother or father, many
Mhm.
people will go further to study more and more on how to help others because it is so profound, or they will go into channeling. Last week we had on the podcast Dr. Matthew McKay, and he talked about with him, once he started having these experiences with his son and learning that he could channel these messages, then his work started shifting and opening up to bring it forward. And I think that we can have these profound experiences later, just like you said.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I would add, these experiences, however you want to frame it, whether you call it otherworldly or metaphysical, it doesn't really matter what we name it, but they're not, in my opinion, you can't make them happen. You're not in charge. They happen when they happen. And that's kind of the beauty and the mystery of it.
Yeah, I think you can, though. I can call my mom in. Mom, what's the message? And I can hear her talk to me. So I think you can when you open up that channel. But then there's all these other times when a hummingbird will show up. That's my mom. Or a funny, fancy old car will show up. That's my dad, right? So I think they do happen in both respects. But I think the first thing that we want to recognize, as you're talking about in your book, is that we can continue that relationship and have those kind of moments.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I definitely talk to my mom every day, and that's an important part of my day. And I am able to hear her. But I think sometimes, at least what I've heard from some people, they try to make this like huge um experience to happen, or and often it's in the little things that we might miss.
Oh, I so agree. I so agree. Like that little hummingbird that comes around, like I just mentioned, it is in the little things, and sometimes they can be overlooked when we try too hard. Yeah. So now in your book, you interview about 20 other women that have lost their mother, right? And you get to have different experiences and different understandings. And I think that's important that we hear it. I know when I lost my mother, I had lived with her for the last 5 years and I had sat
Mhm.
by her side. And the one time I leave, I had to go help my daughter. That's when she chose to pass. And sometimes it can happen that way. I know you talked about your experience. Your mother was like waiting for you and you made it back just in time for her. She was in hospice. So there are many ways. And sometimes it does happen. It was hard for me to accept that, but I did come to understand it better and better. So everybody has those different experiences. So those ones that you share are very valuable for us to read.
Well, thank you. And you're right. Everybody's experience is different. And whatever the choice that your mom or another mom or a dad or whomever it might be, I think, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that they choose how they would like to pass, and what is important, particularly to them for whatever reason. And that's kind of private between you and your mom, or, whoever the person is, who's passing. Um, what I found, I was really interested, not only, I spent a lot of years talking to women, um, to find out what helped them. I mean, honestly, I was very I was very disappointed in the grief books that I was reading. They didn't speak to me at all. And there were a lot of cliches that I thought were god awful. And when you're in pain, everybody is looking for something different. I don't think it's a one size fits all for sure. Um, but that's really why I wrote the book, because I wanted to share the research that I did and the information. And I work in the healthcare profession. I work at a medical school, and I'm really interested in educating healthcare professionals about their patients, because patients in grief often they can't sleep, they can't eat, they throw up. GI problems are very, very common. They can't focus. They're not able to get out of their house. And sometimes drugs are really helpful. I'm not against drugs by any means. Um, I'm I'm always for whatever helps you is great, as long as you're working with somebody that you trust and you feel comfortable with. But one thing that I did that share in my book that I found was really helpful. I had a wonderful friend who was a masseuse, and I would see her every week. She would give me a massage. She actually worked a lot on my spine. She did a whole immunity session with me, because you're also more vulnerable to being sick because you're not taking care of yourself. And I couldn't verbalize what I was feeling. It was beyond words at that point, and for quite a while. And I would just cry. I would just cry. I would release. It was so incredibly helpful. And I would love doctors to really pay attention to what their patients are telling them, because they're the experts. And like I said, if you need medication to help you through, that's great. But you can, take walks, make sure you eat really well, make sure you sleep. Uh,
Reiki was my go-to.
oh,
Getting
Reiki's
Reiki
fabulous.
sessions, Reiki on myself, Reiki around the family, because that was about all I could do. I cried for months. I am of the Jewish tradition, and we honor our parents for 11 months, and then we come out. It took me every bit of those 11 months, every bit of it. And I think you mentioned this in the book. There is no time on grief. For me, for someone to say, oh, quit your grieving, quit your crying, that didn't help at all. That wasn't the way to look at it. So I allowed myself all of that time to grieve. And I think that's important for people to hear. And I kept trying to, I remember I do a lot of tapping. I was looking at the tapping teacher, help me to stop crying. Like, no, that's not what it's about. You can tap on judgment on your own self for crying so much, but grief is needed, and it takes time, and however much time. And I think that point is very important for people to hear. Right. I think that when we can have some of the protocols and culture, right, in our own self, and how we can help ourselves to heal, because it is different for everybody.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I mean, I remember one of my mother's friends came over to see me, and she said, nobody's going to want to be with you, because I was so sad. And it was kind of like, get over it. And I think this was maybe 3 months after my mother had passed. And I was shocked. I was shocked because she was a mother, and she knew my mother so well. And it really angered me, because it didn't allow for what I was going through. I mean, what I wanted and needed at that point was someone to put their arm around me and validate, I know how much your mom loved you. I know how sad you must be. What can I do, Janet? What would be helpful? I mean, that's probably one of the best things that people outside of the family, or even family members can do for someone who's in deep grief. Ask the question, I don't know what to do that would help you, but I really want to. So, what do you think would help you this week? What can I do? And maybe it's bringing food,
That's
or
our
maybe,
culture. Yeah.
right. I'm
Yeah.
Jewish
And you
too.
know what? I mean, even now when I go into the temple, people will say, you remind me of your mother, your mother, your mother. And my father, my mother was more part of the temple, but that was a really comforting thing to still hear. And it's now been 6, 7 years. And the same for my dad. Sometimes when they say, "Oh, I knew your dad," I'm a little surprised. Not that he wasn't known, but like usually I'm used to hearing people say, I knew your mother." But I
Uh-huh.
think these are suggestions that all of us need to hear. And I think finding those rights for yourself are really important. There was a point in my journey through those 11 months when there was a point when I thought, I need to find a little courage to step out of this because I started making excuses and imprints for the grief. All of a sudden, I was finding myself going deeper and deeper into not wanting to come out, and grief became the excuse. And so I had to work a little bit on my own self. Not that anybody was telling me that, but having a little bit of like, okay, let's just open up a little bit more. Let's see if we can step forward a little bit more because I was starting to spiral a little bit. So again, I think that everybody's journey is important to recognize and not to feel bad. Like for me to feel bad, someone telling me that, no, this was me telling me that.
Well, you had the self-reflection to do that, and I think, well, a few things. One is asking for help is not a bad thing, or if you're around someone who is not able to function or is having a really difficult time, being a loving friend or family member to say, I notice you're having a really difficult time, and maybe we could talk about that. Um, reaching out for support, I think is incredibly helpful. I didn't have much. So it was extremely not only difficult, it was extremely, painful. And even allowing yourself, okay, I'm going to spend the day out in nature and I'm going to walk with my grief. I am going to talk to my grief. I'm going to write it out or whatever works for you. There isn't like a one thing that actually works. I will mention what actually really helped me. I walked every night for about an hour. I was living at my dad's condo at the time in Florida, and I just walked and just I mean, he would just push me out of the house and just getting outside, being in a different environment, looking at a tree, um, listening to my footsteps. I wasn't really thinking anything particularly. I needed movement. I needed to just move. Um, but I agree with you. I think, everyone is different, and wouldn't it be great if more people paid attention to their grieving friends or family? And, one thing I suggest, which I didn't have, but I wish I had, was just finding a partner, finding somebody you could call, having a commitment, Terri Ann, when I feel really crappy, would it be okay to call you? Or would it
Very
be
important.
okay if you just came over and sat with me? And maybe it's not about talking, maybe it's just feeling like, oh, I'm not alone. And my good friend Terri Ann is here and she's sitting with me and we're having coffee or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um,
I think sometimes the danger, Janet, can be, and this happened with me, is that I began to isolate a little bit, even though those resources were available. But I
mhm,
just began to pull myself further and further. And I think that's when I began to notice I'm separating myself out, which is a human condition when we
sure.
separate out. So when we find, like you suggested, find a partner, find somebody that won't mind you to call, I think that's a very helpful suggestion to work with. And even it's just let's go for a walk. To me, sometimes that was the better thing. And that's kind of how I started to get out. Let's go for a walk and finding someone. So I agree with you about the walk. But there are many ways that we can and definitely checking on people when they're in their situation because we do need to find out how they are and not being afraid. And I think your book does a really great job of bringing that forward. You interviewed over 20 women, or I guess 20 women, I guess maybe it was more to do the whole book together, but everybody shared their unique experiences. Was there one that stuck out for you more so than the others?
I would say not one in particular, but what I would say is the commonality,
Hmm.
knowing, I mean, a number of things, knowing I wasn't alone, knowing that the grief I was feeling was incredibly deep and often excruciating, and knowing I was not the only one, was extremely comforting. And also, I would say, I love their stories of how they kept their connection, how they would do, a few women told me, they would do rituals on their birthday, or they planted their name out in the garden and they would just sit in the garden. Or, as you said about the bird, a bird would appear, or they started doing a dream diary and paying attention to their dreams. Um, I mean, one woman who wrote, not in the survey interviews that we're talking about, but in the narrative, I have a whole narrative section of women who wrote these really beautiful essays, about their relationships with their mother, what happened, and most importantly, and I chose their essays based on this, I wanted the reader to read something that was empowering, that would leave them with hope, that would help them feel, oh, I don't have to relinquish my relationship. I still have a relationship because I love my mother. My mother loved me. Love doesn't die. And I think one woman well, actually wrote about this experience when she was pregnant. She had a midwife, excuse me, that she was working with. And when the day she went into the hospital, when she was in labor, her midwife wasn't available. And the midwife that showed up had the exact same name as her mother. And she said when she gave birth and she was sitting in bed with her baby, she could feel that it was her mother's eyes that were focusing on the baby through this midwife who had her mother's name, which I thought was such an extraordinary story. And the woman who wrote it had lost her mother when she was extremely young. So she didn't
Mm,
really remember her mother.
mm. I
So
had a
that's
similar experience just recently. I'm a new
really,
grandmother. My daughter just had the first baby, right? So my first grandchild, and she asked me, "Will you be Mimi?" That was my mother. And I was sitting at her place. It's just about, I guess now it's a month. He's a month old. But I was
yeah.
sitting there with the baby in one hand and her dog there, and just sitting there, and I could just feel my mother come in. And there was so much love, and tears were pouring down me. And I was just in this moment caught in time, which I think is what's proving this point that you're making, that we can still have these bonds and we can still bring forward this energy. Then my daughter came out and she snapped a picture, but it was like one of these moments that is just like, priceless. It just took my breath away and just left me feeling like right here, there she is. I
Oh, I
feel
love
it.
that. I
Yeah,
love that. Well, one thing my mother did tell me after she had passed, which I still blows me away, she said, after death, you get to keep your heart,
beautiful. You do.
which,
And I think the relationship can change. And I also think that you can heal parts that may have been hurting for you in your relationship. We can still continue that connection. I think that's
oh,
really
absolutely.
important. Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Whether it's through
Yeah.
dialogue or art
Yeah.
or,
Dreaming, writing, connecting. I so agree. Now, let me ask you this question because your book is about daughters that honor their mothers. Do you think that's any different than when you lose a father?
I would say it's probably different for everybody. I think the same tools apply in terms of making that connection. I think that connection with, if you're close or you were close with your dad, that continues. I've had many experiences with my dad after his pass. In fact, he showed up last night and was talking to me out of the blue. Um, I guess, I'm only an expert on my situation. I can tell you, I remember after my mom died, I said he was trying to help me, as much as he could, because he could see how much I was suffering. And I said, it's not that I love mom more. I just loved her differently. And he looked at me and he said, don't you think I know that? Which was a very deep thing for my dad to say because he wasn't, big on communication. But
Yeah.
no, I think, the eternal bond with anyone we love, whether it's a child, a mother, a father, a cousin, a friend, that continues, because as I mentioned earlier, it's the energy of love. It's the energy of connection. And and I do write about this because it's really bothers me. I hate the verbiage, like, well, let her go. You have to let her go, or you have to let him go. Or, I was told if I didn't do that, I was somehow impeding my mother's progress, on the other side, which is total bullshit because how do you know, not you personally, but the person that said it to me, how do they know what's going on the other side? They have no idea. I mean, that's a huge mystery. Um,
Which I agree. I think it's part of our soul contract when we come in. We're the ones that choose it, right? I think that's part of it. Can't prove it, but those are my teachings.
yeah,
But I
exactly.
think there is a sense of let them have the opportunity to release the soul from the body. It can also be looked at like that. And I had many conversations with my dad. He was depressed. He didn't want to be around anymore. And I kept telling him, like, it's okay to let go. It wasn't like me letting go of him, but it was okay for him to let go. And I think that's an important distinction. Sometimes our loved ones needs to hear it. It's just like my mom, I felt like was hanging on to me. And then when I did leave, that's when it was okay for her, but we can't prove these things, but this is my theories and how I look at it and how I can resolve.
No, I understand that. I'm relating it more to not let somebody go when they're here. I mean, after they've passed away. I was told, that relationship needed to be relinquished,
Oh my
which I,
goodness. I don't think let it go. I agree. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's all
no, I
right.
think it goes on forever, forever. And I have
Oh,
a better
absolutely.
relationship with my father, I think, now than I did then. We had to take care of my mom after he passed, and I feel like I never grieved. And then after she died, it was both of them. But I have conversations with both of them all the time. And I think that's an important aspect that we can continue to do that. I see what you're saying. Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that. Yeah.
And I think it's very comforting. I mean, at least for me,
Yeah.
I have her picture. I'm looking at her picture right now, a picture of me and her on my desk, and
Yeah.
I talk to her all the time. I ask her for advice. Um, I having that is really important. Um,
Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, the danger if someone becomes so isolated that they don't want to live in the world, or and a few people have told me after their moms had died, they wanted to kill themselves, which is very, very tragic. And not everybody has help. So that's why I'm also a big supporter, not only of finding help, but and I do write about this at length because I had some really bad experiences. I think it's really important if you see a therapist to interview them, to talk to them, because remember, as after somebody passes, you're incredibly vulnerable. So it's important to find someone that you connect with. And not only that, ask the question, well, how do you think you can help me on my grief journey? Are you are you able to talk about dreams? Do you believe in, what do their philosophies mirror your philosophies? You know, I just think it's really important to have that conversation. And after going to many people who didn't help me at all, and in fact said some pretty damaging things, I found an amazing therapist who I loved, and we became really good friends. And she got me and was supportive and very nurturing. And um, thank God,
Yeah.
that I
I think
had
that's
him.
good advice in general for choosing a therapist because you do have to have that relationship, and every therapist is going to be different. And asking them, what tools do you use? Of course, I'm going to say, what energy tools do you use as well? Those are going to be
Yeah,
my questions, right? And there's
sure.
so many more therapists. I know I've trained a lot of them, but working with Reiki and EFT and now EMDR is very important too. But even suggestions of meditation and things like this. So I think it is important, I think overall in general, but especially during grief. Now, your book is laid out very well. The first part talks about grief, talks about what you went through, those sacred connections. The second part has all the healing narratives of all the different people. And then the third part, you start talking about prescriptives for healing and giving people suggestions and meditations and journal prompts. And I think that's really important. And what a great way to outline in the book. So very good. Very well done. Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is your overall mission for the book?
My mission, I think of where I was after my mom passed away, and I was a mess, and how difficult and challenging it was for me to resurrect myself. And I wanted to write a book for that woman, for that woman who's in grief and challenged and doesn't know what to do next, or doesn't have a supportive community, or maybe doesn't even have a therapist or a doctor they trust. So my mission really is to help empower them on their journey. I also want to empower healthcare professionals because I think it's important for them to be more knowledgeable about death and dying and grief. And I teach death and dying courses to medical students and to residents, so I'm familiar with their lack of training. And it isn't something, even when a death occurs in a hospital, they don't necessarily have the support or know what to do. So I'm trying also, to reach them and to help them. And um, I want to remove the taboo. It's okay to talk about grief. It's okay to cry. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to talk about your connection, with the other side. That is normal.
Yeah.
It happens.
It is. And the more we talk about it, the better it is. At my temple, I'm part of what we call the Hevakadisha, which is a group of women and men, but I work with the women that helps prepare the body. And traditionally, it was always a sacred and quiet. You didn't tell anybody. And a lot of that is changing now. We've had many conversations. Well, I thought you weren't supposed to say anything. But I think it's also too that death was not talked about. So I think both of them are coming now to the forefront where we are talking about it, and we're talking about it with the community on what we do instead of keeping it so quiet and hushed. It's still sacred though. We don't lose any of that. But I think the more we talk about it, and just like that death cafe, there were many people there, from death doulas to midwives to just people that were still in, grieving stress, that wanted to join in the conversation. I think they were surprised too at how many people showed up. So case in point, the work that you're doing and the book that you're bringing forward is helping at a time that we really need it, so that we can recognize. And I think also too, it helps us expand our consciousness, right? Life is not finite. We continue just because we're not in this physical body. We continue. And to me, that's just such a comforting and reassuring thing. Now, when I was going through that with my mother, especially those first few months, I don't care what you said, none of that helped me. I had to find that for myself because as humans, we have to go through that grief process. So, yes, people go, oh, you'll see her in the dead. I'm in the yoga community. Oh, you'll see her again. Oh, Yes, I do. But right now, I'm in the grieving as a human. So I think we need both aspects, and I think grief can go through many stages.
I absolutely agree. And by normalizing conversations, as you said, and talking about it in temple and talking about it in the community, um, it validates what you're going through. And I mean, I remember I was in Whole Foods, and I write about this maybe a month or two after my mom had passed. I'm not sure the timeline. And there was a woman in the store who I swear looked just like my mother. And normally I'm pretty shy, like I wouldn't do this. I went up to her and I told her my mom had passed and that looked strikingly like my mother. She had her feature. My mother was a really beautiful woman and she looked very similar. And the woman put her arms around me, which was so comforting. And I also had another experience. I don't know what it was about Whole Foods, but I'm in the bakery department, whatever. And this guy came up to me, somebody I didn't know, and I didn't know what he wanted particularly, maybe to make conversation or whatever. And he said, I just want you to know that your mother's with you and she'll never leave. And he walked away.
There you go. A little
And I
message. How
thought,
beautiful.
what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you explain that? I can't, even if
Those
I
are
was
just
a
special,
skeptic,
beautiful
right?
spiritual moments. I agree. So my mother now shows up as a time angel, especially when I do things around the temple. I took her place in the Hever Kadisha. And one day I was trying to get to the cemetery and I kept hearing her say, Terry, you better go. Terry, you better go. And I go, all right, mama. All right, mama. And I'm getting there. I'm getting there and getting there. And I feel her energy the whole time I'm there and get to the cemetery. And one of the women that showed up knows me. She goes, hi, Virginia. How are you? Which was my mother's name. And it just made me realize, like, okay, you see, mama's right here with me, right? And so it was like she didn't even realize she said it, right? But it was like that energy and that presence. It was very amusing and yet confirming that yes, mom is with me, yelling at me about getting on time, right? And yeah, those are some humorous things that we can still carry on long after they're gone. And I think that's the beautiful message. The eternal bond is really the beautiful message that you are bringing forward. So I think your mission will be very successful, definitely. So where can we find you? Are you teaching? You said you teach at college.
I do. I teach at it's called the Dr. Corinne Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine it's in Fort Lauderdale, but I do a lot of my work online.
Great.
My teaching, my death and dying courses, and I teach spirituality in medicine. I also teach art in medicine. Um,
We have a beautiful arts and medicine program here in Birmingham.
really?
UAB. Yes, we do. Give them a shout out. Yes, we do. Yeah. I
Well,
can't get Reiki over there, but we certainly have a beautiful program that we do. Yes, for
that's
sure.
important. And I think
Yeah.
more medical schools do have something. They have lectures or they have some kind of presentation. So I'm always happy to hear that. That's great.
Nice.
That's
Yes,
really
and I
good.
will put your links in the show notes and give a shout out to Llewellyn for bringing this forward for you. That's awesome
Yeah,
that they do.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks to Kat
definitely.
Neff who set it up. So that's really wonderful. Yeah, I know the book is available now, so I'm excited about that. And
That'll be great. Yeah, I can put all those links in the show notes. So as we go to round up, I know we've probably have said this, but if you could leave our listeners with one last uplifting thought on how you feel that this eternal bond and the ways in which daughters honor their mothers on the other side, how is it can help to empower the spirit right now?
knowing that that connection is there forever and one doesn't have to relinquish it is incredibly empowering.
I agree. We don't have to relinquish that relationship. And I think that's a beautiful point to bring forward. So I really appreciate your work and all that you're doing. Thank you so much for
Well,
bringing this
thank
out into the
you.
world.
And
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing your story as well. And I'm really pleased to be on your program. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to your spirit. Namaste. What a truly beautiful and reassuring conversation with Janet. Her work reminds us of a profound truth. The bonds we have with those we love, especially our mothers, are truly eternal. They don't end, they simply change forms. The love we have for our mothers and for all of our loved ones who have passed is a current that continues to flow. We can find ways to still feel that love, to recognize their presence in the whispers of the world, in unexpected signs, and in the quiet moments of reflection. It's a connection that death cannot sever. But let's be clear, navigating grief is hard. It can feel isolating, confusing, and overwhelming. The most important thing to remember is that you don't have to do it alone. There is support, there is understanding, and there is a community of others who walk a similar path. I've been there. So reach out. And if today's conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Dr. Roseman's book, The Eternal Bond. And if you're ready to explore your own spiritual journey and heal your timeline, remember to check out the link in the show notes to learn about my past, present, future, the Akashic Timeline Healing Method classes, or schedule a one-on-one spiritual upgrade call with me. You don't have to do this alone. Thank you to Dr. Janet Lynn Roseman for sharing her wisdom and her heart with us today. And thank you for opening your mind and your hearts to this conversation. Until next time, May you feel the love that surrounds you, both seen and unseen. Thanks for listening. I am your host, Terri Ann Heiman, to your spirit. Namaste. Hey, y'all, in the Birmingham area, come join Alicia Strathers and I at the Cha House on December 6th from 12 to 1:30 for a Reiki knitting event. Gather in sacred stillness to weave warmth and Reiki into scars for individuals experiencing homelessness, a circle of compassion, intention, and quiet transformation. We will be infusing Reiki as we knit scars for the homeless, threaded with intention, wrapped in compassion, stitch by stitch, we shift the world. Materials provided or bring your own. Donations are warmly welcomed.